The worst week in crypto is behind us since the crash of FTX last year. My goodness, what a week, especially Friday, Saturday, I think, or Thursday, Friday, depending on which time zone you're in. It was brutal. And I want to discuss what could be the potential reasons for the crash. I want to discuss how long is this crash going to keep going. And obviously I want to discuss what are other things that we need to look at. So let's get going. We're going to start with crypto. Normally we've always started with earnings. We've started with macro. This is completely irrelevant right now. Someone is selling Bitcoin and is selling it aggressively. Now, obviously the big reason for the massive crash were all the liquidations that got built up. Why these liquidations? Well, it's very simple. When the market goes sideways, people get very bored. They are overconfident and they build up these leverage positions because they want to make money even out of the small volatility. A lot of those people who use a lot of quant models during those times, for example, they start realizing that the volatility is way too low, then they start building the positions, get overconfident, and then bam, over $1 billion got liquidated in 24 hours. And so this just kind of highlights again, don't trade dollar cost average, invest for the long term. Now, there was a trigger, and the question is, what was that trigger? And there are several factors. First, and that was kind of the big rumor here, SpaceX / Elon Musk selling Bitcoin. Now, I want to be very clear, there's absolutely no evidence to that. It could easily be that SpaceX and Elon sold Bitcoins, but it's absolutely, there's no evidence in that this actually had anything to do with the sell-off. Sure, it may have exacerbated it with the news, but if those Bitcoins were sold, then they got sold already way earlier. So completely irrelevant in my opinion. If that had been the case, then I would expect a bounce back up relatively soon. Now, I don't think that was much of a case, so I'll discount that. Number two was the Evergrande debacle, where Evergrande is filing for Chapter 15 bankruptcy. Why a Chapter 15? Very simple. In comparison to a Chapter 11, which basically puts all the assets into the US jurisdiction, Chapter 15 only segregates those assets. Now, a lot of people are talking here that this is a very smart move from Evergrande because it allows China to support the local investors in China and is really going to screw the US investors, everyone who invested in the US, because they only get what are the assets in the US and they kind of segregate everything out from the rest of the market. So this is, obviously a key topic, and it's definitely part of the issue. I want to be very clear. We also saw this with stocks. Stocks also sold off quite heavily. So something to really kind of keep in mind. And let's see how this kind of goes on. It's going to be interesting to see, is China going to support its local investors? Yes or no? And I think that's going to be a key kind of focus point. Now, obviously, topic number 3 is the entire story around Michael Burry. I had discussed this last week already. People knew that it was not a $1.6 billion as a short bet, but then on the other hand, there's just a lot of iffy stuff going on in the markets. People are worried about a recession. People are worried about things not going so well. So there is some belief, or there's some credible kind of story that, well, it's just not going well. And so people are on their toes, right? I think there's no secret about this. You feel this left and right. And so with all this, it does make sense that people are just a bit more on the worried side. And I do think that kind of just helped that kind of crash, but I don't think it was probably the main kind of consequence. One that I kind of threw around, because at that point it wasn't clear if it was going to have an impact or not, was the entire Grayscale stuff. Now, the Grayscale stuff is the only ETF. If that one gets approved, then we're going to see a strong sell-off in Bitcoin. And I know a lot of people don't understand that, but the reason for that is very simple. These Bitcoins in Grayscale are already sold. They got sold. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a discount. So these Bitcoins are basically sitting in limbo and are just waiting to hit the public market. And this can only happen once either Grayscale actively decides to do this, and they don't want to do that because they are making 2% net on that, and they know exactly what's going to happen. At the moment, that discount is, 20%. So there's a couple $1 billion that are just waiting to hit the market, and that will cause a massive crash. Now, once it gets converted to an ETF, then anyone can do this. And what the trade would be, that people are going to use US dollars, they're going to buy Grayscale. So Grayscale is going to go up slightly. So they buy back those Bitcoins that are in limbo. They are not going to buy new Bitcoins. They're going to buy those Bitcoins that are in limbo. And then they're going to use a short position on Bitcoin futures, pocketing the difference, which is like a 20-25% net gain. So I would do this trade if I would have the information up front that there's actually this conversion. And I had this speculation that on Friday there was going to be news around this, and so a lot of people front ran that. Now there's the story that this may only happen on Tuesday. I don't know. So we're going to see. And the odds of there nothing to happen is actually the highest. So I just kind of said, hey, look, guys, this could be one of the reasons. And I still think it could be one of the reasons. I want to be very, very clear on this. So let's see how this Grayscale story is going to continue. Again, it's the only ETF. If that thing gets converted or gets approved, then I think that would be bearish for the Bitcoin price, especially in the short to mid-short term. Now let's go to two reasons that I think are very possible. So I think those reasons so far are okay possible or okay relevant. Let's say it this way. Binance, big topic. The story is that Binance has a BNB liquidation level at $212. I want to be very clear, a lot of this is rumor. There's not much substance to kind of put a lot of evidence there. So people have been sharing all kinds of flaky kind of things. They've been sharing screenshots, transactions. Again, I think I would give this, like, I'm not saying this is not possible, but I would probably give this like if in court this would never hold, right? So I think this is way too much kind of hocus pocus and way too little of substance. But there is a strong possibility that Binance needs to support the BNB price. We know that Binance bought a lot of Bitcoin and a lot of ETH in the first half of the year, especially in the first quarter of the year, actually, in January and in March. And we know this for a fact. We see the transactions, we know that. We know they sold off their BUSD, and we know they bought a lot of Bitcoins and ETH, and that is actually the reason why crypto did so well. That's the number one reason. And now we know Binance is sitting on this, and they're going to keep sitting on Bitcoin and ETH simply because they don't want to go into anything else that can be censored or seized and so on, right? So they need to have this decentralized asset pool. And obviously, they're going to have loans versus BNB because that's going to allow them to get access to other funds without having to sell those BNB. And the BNB are absolutely essential to their ecosystem. So there is this strong rumor that Binance sold off Bitcoin super aggressively on Binance and on OKX. That's at least the kind of the data here. And that caused this price drop massively down. So could be. Now the question, right? So this is the first actual reason. Now obviously Grayscale is also a reason that's going to continue, but that is a reason why we may see more pain ahead. That's really, really important. The Michael Burry story, sure, but that's a fundamental big thing. The Grayscale stuff, I mean, that's just a question on, is this Grayscale stuff going to get approved? Both SpaceX, that to me is more like story and more emotions. Evergrande, sure, topic. We're going to keep seeing this. But this Binance stuff is going to be something that's very, very, very dangerous. And I mentioned this a couple of times. Binance is the reason why the price went up. It may be the reason why the price really, really goes down. And we have seen this now. So let's see. And that's going to be a key focus. And the other point that's obviously very important is to know that obviously the US has over $1 billion of Bitcoins that they want to sell. And we have seen fund movements in July about this already. And now, I mean, we're talking about $300 million back then. And so there is a high probability that part of these funds actually got sold now. Now, we don't know that, but I just want to point this out. Now, the interesting thing about this is that if this is a reason that why Bitcoin went down, then this would stop now, right? So, because at some point they sold them and that's it. And so, very, very interesting, very, very kind of questionable to ask for the week, right? So it really depends on what are we going to find out. Do we find out that it was Binance? Sure. I don't give much to this tinfoil hat like theory that this is just like, I know, large banks trying to manipulate the price down. I mean, everyone always says this about their investment. You know, oh, this is just the big banks manipulating the Bitcoin price down so that they can get an entry point. I don't know. I mean, sure, maybe, but this to me is like always just a the coping mechanisms of people who just don't want to deal with the fact that their price just went down, and they're trying to kind of tell people on what the price is going to go up soon because people just sold to buy. I don't know. So that to me is always a bit of a tricky one, to be honest. I don't give this too much credibility. And so it's going to depend a bit on this. Now, from that, and that's going to be the main focus, obviously, in crypto. I think that's going to be key. Bitcoin is going to set the direction here. But I have to say, most altcoins actually outperformed over this period. And that's quite crazy, right? Ethereum outperformed, DeFi chain outperformed. Like, most of the altcoins actually outperformed Bitcoin over the weekend since Thursday, simply because it was really Bitcoin who was pressured with the price. And so that kind of clearly shows that it was Bitcoin that sold off. And I mean, yeah, it was also the asset that was mostly bought in the first quarter of the year, and then obviously with the Bitcoin spot ETF Hopium in Q2. So kind of makes sense that it's also being sold off right now. Now, we do have two macro things, in my opinion, or two non-crypto things to watch this week. We have Jackson Hole, where the Fed is going to make a few speeches and talks and kind of shares a little bit about their thinking. I think that's happening on Thursday, so that's definitely something to watch. That's going to give us a bit of an idea. Are we going to see higher interest rates for longer? Does the Fed think that, we need to actually print money to pay off debt, which then causes, obviously, potential inflation? That means we need to have higher interests for longer. So kind of this cycle of how am I going to repay debt that no one else wants to buy? Well, I just print the money myself. I basically debase my own money. So that's kind of that's going to be a bit of a story. And the other one is going to be NVIDIA. NVIDIA is the last kind of company to report, very separate from the rest of the group. Why is this relevant? Why? Well, it's going to tell us a little bit about AI. And that's going to be key to understand here. How is AI going to go? And look, AI has been a main detractor away from crypto. A lot of VC funds, a lot of entrepreneurs and so on that normally would go into crypto, now going into AI. And so that's going to be a key focus point. It's going to be very interesting to see. And that's definitely something to watch out for. So I think that's crucial. On the big side, on my company side, dollar cost averaging going strong. We're raffling off a lot of beautiful things. So if you're not dollar cost averaging yet, check this out. We're also going to be launching a few cool things this week. So I think that's interesting. A few updates. If you haven't downloaded our app, go to big.io. The DeFi chain improvement proposal just got approved about staking the collateral ETH. So those are going to get staked, and those ETH are going to generate cash flow. This ETH is going to be used to buy and burn DFI. So that's going to be an interesting one. So yeah, very, very smart move in my opinion from the community to go this direction. So that should be very strong for the DFI price. Obviously, testnet, I think the final version of the testnet just got uploaded to GitHub. So if there's no further bugs found or no further things found, that's going to be the version that's going to go into mainnet. Fingers crossed. So we are on a good track here. This, mainnet isn't too far away now. That's quite exciting. So a lot of very constructive, supportive things in all this. And but let's see. I mean, at the end, it's really going to depend a bit on what's the dollar price of all these things doing. My tip for you, focus on things that you can control. Don't trade dollar cost average. Focus on your business, on your work, focus on yourself. I don't know, go to the gym, go running, focus on your family, focus with friends. I just had a beautiful barbecue yesterday, Sunday, with friends. So look, that's the key thing. And so, yeah, with that, I wish you a beautiful week. All the best. It's a rainy morning here in Singapore. Stay safe. See you next time. Yours truly, Julian. Bye-bye.